So for our second market talk, we will continue on the thread of the political implication of all this very beautiful advanced crypto. You have seen some of it in Giacomo's talk and some of it in Michele's talk. And now we will switch to a word of caution and a bit of a more skeptical point of view. For this, we have here with us Carmela. Carmela is scientific director at the Max Planck Institute in Bochum. And her entire line of work is focused on building and deploying secure privacy-preserving systems with a special focus on minimizing societal harms. A big example of this is the development of TP3T, the decentralized privacy-preserving proximity tracing used during the COVID pandemic. Mel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It's very intimidating. I have never been in Eurocrypt before. I'm not a cryptographer. So I was very surprised when these guys decided to invite me. But well, I'm going to come here and tell you my perspective on how crypto can and cannot help, and what can we do to make it a bit more helpful on the societal side. And these are the limits of privacy-enhancing technologies. I think they have been working for more than 10 years now. And I could also have called this talk the thing that doesn't let me sleep, besides that guy. And nowadays, pets are cool. Pets are everywhere. When I did my PhD back in 2007, the pets, we had Thor. And we're so excited because Thor was out there. And then we were doing a lot of crypto and a lot of stuff, but there was no way that these things would ever make it there. And nowadays, we have them implemented everywhere, right? And some people just get like 80 millions on the financement from VCs to just get pets in the wild. And this last month in Real World Crypto, we had both Google and Apple coming and presenting how they were having pets like at large scale. This is like amazing. But in all of these deployments, and all of these advances that we have seen that are mainly fueled by blockchains and cryptocurrencies and machine learning, the idea is that privacy is all about data confidentiality, right? The less data we have, the more privacy we have. Good, everybody agrees. So let's just build systems in which we don't have data that the provider has to manage. And then we'll verify. And then if you throw crypto, differential privacy, AT, any combination of those that you like the most and give you the next Eurocrypt paper, you have a neat solution, right? And it will actually get in, and if you're lucky, you may get 80 million out of it. And from a confidentiality perspective, right, from a crypto perspective, and we give all our very nice definitions, privacy is warranted. And for a while, I also was on this boat. And then one day, I was developing more things for not much as the broad community, but actually for at-risk communities, thinking more about these things. And I had to give an invited talk, a keynote, I think at the Zurich or something. And I went and wanted to put, the article of privacy, right? I wanted to talk about it, and I went there. And I hope you can read this, I don't know if it's big enough, but actually, if we look at this article 12, which is called the right to privacy, this thing that we also always say that all of this crypto is doing, there is nothing about confidentiality. The right to privacy is the right to not be interfered, the right to keep our intimacy, the right to keep our independency. And this is really what it was always embodied on this kind of ideas, and it's actually what is embodied on the idea of privacy that we develop on our offline world, when we're not telling our secrets to other people just to keep them secret. We're not telling them because we don't want them to influence us, starting from when we were kids, and we don't tell our parents what we're going to do this afternoon with our friends. It's not that we want to keep a secret from them, it's that maybe we tell them that we're going to go to the mall, they're like, oh no, we don't want you to go to the mall on your own. You're going to go to a place where they would allow you to go. There's no secret neither, right? So it's not really about the information being confidential, but about us preventing what happens if the information is revealed. And confidentiality does not always do this, right? And let me bring a couple of examples. We have, if you remember, the famous Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, right? In which Cambridge Analytica kind of took a lot of data from Facebook users through kind of a misleading app, and with this they took very basic information from these users and they used it to create profiles, and arguably these targeted advertisements that they put on the political scene influenced the 2016 US elections, right? That was a very funny thing at the time. It ended up with some people storming the Capitol, and even Eurocrypt is paying off nowadays exactly what happened with all of these elections and the current presidency of the United States, right? It had a very big influence. It also influenced the Brexit vote, so there was a lot of influence. And when this happened, and you look at the news, again, all of the news about data. Like the data was leaked, and the data, and Facebook, and they were fined because the data was made public, right? It's all about the data. So what if we were nowadays, and then they could actually deploy all these very cool pets that you guys have been kind of making crypto possible, and people have been implemented. Facebook could have done an API where you could have differentially privately trained the model, right? Instead of just stealing the data, all good, all privacy kosher. Facebook and Cambridge Analytica could have done multi-party computation. Nowadays we have super cool protocols, very cheap, lots of papers that tells Eurocrypt, S&P on how to do machine learning over MPC. Or they could, give some millions and say like, okay, I have an FHE, and even nowadays we can run machine learning on FHE. So all of these options would actually do this thing where no leak of data would have existed, right? Data would all have been there and everybody would be happy. But if we look back again on the dear Article 12, a model trained on a privacy-preserving way enables to do the same inferences on a model that is not. Well, that's what the people that write the paper say. It's not fully true, but let's say it's completely true. So you would still have all the problems that we had. We never had a problem. Sure, it was all about, oh, Cambridge Analytica took the data. But the problem was not the leaking of the data, the problem was what happened with it. So if we apply all of this confidential computing, we would still be on the same page. And we would still be saying, like, oh my goodness, what happened, right? The data was collected, or the data was not collected, but we had a lot of influence on the most sacred processes of our society, which is the democratic processes in which we choose our governments. So, another example that we have nowadays is the European Digital Identity, the UD or UNDI, depending on who we talk. And the core idea, and Michele talked about this before, that we're going to have a digital ID that improves the trust of digital services. That's the kind of the core idea. In practice, what this is a wallet of trustworthy attributes that you can just present here and there, and that means that when you do transactions online, it's not anymore a trust-based thing, it's actually something where you can prove that maybe you are actually a person registered in a particular city hall, you have an identity, you have a particular bank account, you have a degree, you work at the university, you name it. And of course, this again puts the privacy alarm kind of in a very big space, and a lot of civil society has come out for this. Because if we have attributes all over the place, we're a bit on the same issue as with Cambridge Analytica. We have a lot of linkability of people all around the place, we can do profiling, and then we have all the same kind of problems of how this data can be used to influence us and to interfere. And the crypto community is like, well, guys, we know how to solve this, right? We have done this actually for a very long time, since the early 2000s. We have anonymous credentials all around the place, and nowadays, Michele gave a brilliant talk about the current state of it, but we have anonymous credentials that do a lot of lifting, one show, multi-show, publicly verifiable, keyed, anything, you name it. And even nowadays, like, this has become self-transferable, and that even big tech and industry that for the last 25 years were ignoring the fact that this thing existed and were absolutely ready to be deployed, now decided that they're going to come up with the game, right? That this is even a kind of a business opportunity. Now, does this solve the problem again, right? There are different things with this, and this one is a much more subtle than the Cambridge Analytica one. So one problem is that a lot of this is not even a crypto problem. Because even if we have anonymous credentials, what attributes are revealed and how, like in which instance, with what granularity, is actually not a crypto problem. Because what you encode in the proof is not a crypto problem. The crypto allows me to encode stuff in my zero-knowledge proof, but what I encode is actually a policy decision. So how much we're going to reveal is not about do we have zero-knowledge proofs or need an attribute-based credentials, but it's actually about what are in the EU idea they're called reliant providers, the people that ask you for attributes going to ask, and what they're going to be allowed to ask for. And that means that function creep, the place in which we think that in the beginning we have privacy, but by asking for more and more attributes and more granularity, we can stop having it even if we prove it in zero-knowledge, is very likely to happen, and especially given that in the last month, the European Commission has, so we had civil society especially had achieved that in the whole regulation there was a provision that said that reliant parties, these people that are going to ask you for attributes, actually needed a certificate that said that they are official and that these are the attributes that they were allowed to ask, right? And the idea of this is that these reliant providers will have to go to somebody and kind of prove to them in a way that they were not over-asking. But it turns out that the European Commission has decided that this is too hard to implement. Some countries maybe cannot implement this thing. It will hurt the business behind all of this electronic identity, and then they're going to make this optional. This means that anybody can just come and ask you for any attribute, and you cannot test if they are legitimately asking for it or not. Which is very nice for people on my field. We're going to have plenty of measurement studies about how people ask for their own attributes, the same as we nowadays have them for cookie banners. But it's going to be a very problematic situation. So that's the one thing, which is part of the privacy problem. Is not even a crypto problem. And once you have the attributes, then we're back kind of to the problem that we had. Problem number 2 is that digital identity problems will weigh beyond privacy. We have issues, and these have been proven in different IDs implemented around the world. The main one is Aadhaar in India, that came very strongly to actually help all those people that don't have an identity. But what it ended up building walls for all of those people, because Aadhaar became a necessity, became something that you need to access services. And some people didn't get it, or then we have the problem that if you have a digital system, you have to make it work. And yeah, on paper, very nice. On practice, in a country with millions and millions of users as India, this is hard. Sometimes even if you have the identity, maybe you're not in the system, you're not correctly in the system. And this happened, for instance, there were some studies that said that people have starved because of the introduction of the identity. Right? Because they didn't have the correct proof, they were not given the food and the place, because now you don't have your card, you don't have the food, and they died. And this is very important, right? That there's no discrimination, and actually, again, civil society is making a lot of effort to make sure that this is embedded in the European digital identity, that there is a provision that says that if you don't have the wallet, or you don't want to use the wallet for whatever reason, it's not possible to discriminate you or not to give you a service. And this is very important. If they completely screw up the whole design, that we have the right of kindly opt out from this. And improving privacy in many ways, at the end, we may actually help privacy washing all of these undesirables. It's always a big problem, right? Is it actually, because they will say, well, is privacy preserving? Why is this an issue anymore? And there are other issues, again, that have nothing to do with the privacy of the system. And the problem number 3 is that when we implement privacy and we make things privacy preserving, we actually put a lot of decision on it, because we're deciding what can we do. And that means that when you let somebody decide on the privacy preserving function, they get all the power, right? And here, for instance, we have examples of things that happened in the last years, in which, again, the giants here is in the web advertisement context said, well, we have all of these privacy confidentiality tools. We can use them to actually eliminate cookies and eliminate data collection from the internet, right? And Google presented Splunk, already was substituted by topics and now substituted by something else. But all of them are the same idea, in which Google kind of decides how now our data can be categorized and repackaged to sell to advertisers. Same thing for Apple. They just made it more silently in general, in a very Apple style. I don't know if there's an Apple person here, but how they work. And the question is that what categories are going to be created actually say what advertisements can you have. So if Google and Apple decide that the LGBT community is not going to be represented in a category, well, then the LGBT community doesn't have ads anymore. Right? And you can see many of these things happening more. And in the case of the EAD, actually, when we create these libraries and when Google comes with a new library, they are deciding what kind of proofs can you make, what kind of ranges can you have there. Ranges, non-ranges, equality, what is actually implemented there will define all of the possible functionalities that we can have in something that apparently is going to be the backbone of the European digital economy in the next years. So, interference will still be possible, right? But how and when and who will it affect will be decided by those that implement. And those are these all are problems that crypto kind of is orthogonal, that we need to think about when we bring the crypto to the wall, because actually these are something that from the societal perspective, right, they are extremely important. So my argument is that to solve most of these problems, we must change the design paradigm. And if we want to implement this thing, it's not anymore about protecting the data. It's actually about reducing the functionality of the system. It's about really thinking about how can we protect people from these consequences, and how we protect them is by making sure that only some functions can be implemented such that we limit the harms to the function that we permit. So we stop thinking about data and we start thinking about purposes in terms of data protection. We move from data anonymization, the thing that we have been working on for the last, I don't know how many years, right? That is the main idea that comes when we think about privacy. And we move to purpose limitation. We limit the purpose of the system. And let me give two examples. We have done this in the past, and funnily enough, to get some of this solved, whether it is for the public or for the academic world, we talk a lot about privacy, but actually the main thing that we have done is purpose limitation. One is the contact tracing apps. Yeah, you remember, pandemic, horrible, we were home. COVID spread too fast and we needed to stop these things. The traditional kind of contact tracing was overwhelmed. We couldn't handle this via humans calling on phones, other humans. So the idea was we need to put the technology, and designing the solution was a very hard moment, because whatever we put in there might stay forever as the way of doing things. So we wanted to make sure that, well, there was not a kind of data collection that would kind of become a whole surveillance thing, but more importantly, again, like in the Lord of the Rings, Sauron was the bad guy, but the really bad thing is that he was building the ring of power that allowed him to dominate others, right? And that was the thing that we really wanted to avoid, is that anybody would have that power to do it. So when we designed this protocol, that if you remember, was all about having random identifiers on the phone that were broadcasted, so other people would listen to you, to your random identifiers, would have a list of who they had seen, and if somebody was contagious, they would actually upload their own random identifiers, and you would check, have I seen them? And if you have seen them, and you have seen them enough, you will say, oh shit, and I have COVID now, and the phone will give you an alarm. And how we solved this thing, and a lot of the speech that we had to do at that time was about, this is a lot of privacy, right? These identifiers, there's no identity, no location, no information. It's all great because none of your data is there. But actually what we wanted to do is that the data that was out there was useless. It's absolutely useless for anything that is not exactly that. So there is no possibility of doing harm with it, because these random identifiers are just random numbers. This server just had a big list of random numbers, good for nothing. And that also means that there was another thing that we actually wrote, which is we wanted the system to die kind of fast, because we wanted something that was an emergency. We had to design it without thinking very much. So we wanted to be something that would not stay, right? That could actually be easily dismantled, And a lot of people, especially journalists, asked me like in 2022, are you just sad that the apps didn't disappear? And I was like, this is the biggest success of my career. We created something that was actually so good at not being general, at not being able to be reused, that nobody wanted it. At the moment that it finished doing their job, which it did, actually there are studies that said that they helped, then, well, we dismantled it, and now if we want to create something else, then we need to create a new system, and we don't have big databases of data that now are used for something. Another work that we did, and we work a lot with the Red Cross on digitalization, and humanitarian organizations, they need to digitalize. They know that they have, and they want to, because it is very important. It helps them be more efficient and to better use the resources. But they are also kind of scared about what comes with all of the problems of digitalization, and especially from the data protection office, with the fact that if they collect a lot of data from all of these very vulnerable populations they work for, what can happen? So in this work, we were trying to help with the distribution, and traditionally they just do this with paper, right? Whenever they have to distribute some goods, they will give some lists of paper with a lot of names, and then people just saying, well, who are you? And then they find you there, they go, and they scratch the name. And then at the end, they take all of these papers, and they send them back to headquarters for audit. But this thing does really not scale. It's kind of easy to manipulate, and it's hard to audit, because sending these big chunks of paper back to the headquarters, and the headquarters for audit is in Manila, it is not a trivial thing when we are in the middle of the desert, in the middle of a war. So they came to us and said, can we digitalize things, and how do we do it, right, in a way that we don't increase the risk by, I don't know, I keep putting everything in the blockchain and creating a big database of now all of the movements of everybody. So the first thing that we needed to do is to actually understand what we needed to do. And we had a lot of meetings with the DPO office. We had workshops with ECOSEC. ECOSEC is the department within the Red Cross that actually does the distribution, to understand what is it that they do. I know that they distribute goods, but how does it actually work? What is each of the steps? And in which steps does digitalization make sense? And we learned that they have mainly three phases. One is registration, in which you note down which households receive help. This is something that is very interesting, because we typically think about help for people, but in most of the deployments, they actually give help to groups of people, people that live in a household. And then this entitlement assignment, so where you actually get done, okay, you are this household and this is what you need, depending, well, do you have sick people, do you have kids, do you have what kind of things you have. And then on distribution, they typically also support periodic distribution. Sometimes they do a one-off on a place, but if you're in a catastrophic area or in a war zone, this actually may be periodic, right? Think about Ukraine or Gaza, where this conflict has been going for very, very long. And they want to make sure that they only give things to legitimate recipients, right? This is very important for auditing, and that they can avoid double dipping. This is very important for resource allocation. At the end of the day, they want to help a lot of people, so they don't want to be wasting this thing. It's not about not cheating, it's really about how do they do their job the best as possible. And as I said, right now they just do it by having people scratching the list and having a signature from them. And then there are the audits where they need to provide the proof of distribution to check it out against what they have in the warehouse and decide this was correct. And if you think about forward digitalization, we could do this, right? We just put the database with everything, and this is fantastic. We can even do it with the Raspberry Pi, probably, and deploy it in the middle of the desert. Very nice, but it does actually create a database of things, and we cannot prevent reuse or abuse of this data, because now we have created the data, right? It's there, and then it's output. I have 10 slides. And there is actually evidence that if this data exists, data might actually be used. And we have deployments in which humanitarian organizations have had problems because maybe the local government wants to use this data for something else. For instance, in Yemen, where the World Food Programme wanted to give some help, and they were actually using some of this data. The Yemen were like, yeah, well, you know, now you're going to get the record of all this community of people that we don't know much about, but we actually want to have under control. We want the data. And while the world for programmers was saying, no, we're not giving you the data, you're crazy. People were starving, right? So not having the data is actually also a very big advantage for the humanitarian organizations because it helped us in the deployment. So our solution was to decentralize information, not have a database at all, and then we use a bunch of crypto to actually help us with the other requirements. So the idea is that people would have a smart card. We also have a protocol that allows you to do it with a smartphone for places that have those. And when you register, you get actually your households get your own private key. This is a very normal symmetric key. And we also said that people can authenticate at the car with biometrics. They want to use biometrics, mostly because there is a lot of pressure for people to use biometrics because biometrics make everything better. It's like a blockchain, apparently. So we just created something that can work with biometrics. Donald, want to give that? Sure. Because we created a system where it cannot harm, so good. And then whenever you want to show the distribution station with your food, you have a card, you can prove to the card with your biometric, right, that this is you. Actually, you need a reader, you need something else on the card. And then in the card, we also give a proof that it actually was present at the station. And this proof is just see the random function of your key and the period, right? This is the distribution in March, in April. We're gonna do more basic crypto. So we deploy stuff, mostly we do a lot of basic crypto. And that we can make a node, we call that attack. And also we give a bunch of other things. We give a signature. The signature is just the signature that this comes from a legitimate card, just very normal stuff. And we also use homomorphic commitments to actually commit to the entitlement that you receive. And the idea of that is that at the end of audit, you can actually sum all of the commitments and open to know how much has gone out of the database without actually having a note of who received what. Right? Because here there are no identities and there is no N. And then you can use the tags to actually check for double dipping. Because once the card is signed, if somebody else from your household or you come back, you actually can see in the list, and if the tag comes back, you say, well, this card already has been here, I'm sorry, I already have given you. And the key of all of this is that, again, we created a big table of random numbers. And this thing, you can lose it, you can give it to the Yemen authorities, you can do anything you want with it, because again, it's essentially a bit useless for anything else that is not the three functions that actually we agreed with Red Cross that we would do. This is the most basic schema. Later on, they said they had some other requirements, so we also have extended these to work in a wallet way. So instead of saying, okay, I want 3 bags of rice, it would be, okay, I have 10 units of currency, whatever the currency is, and then this thing allows you to spend some money at local shops and kind of have the same properties and the same privacy. And we also have extended it to have some statistics on what kind of recipients receive what, which is useful for them to improve their operations. And we also have done that with as much privacy as we can. So this is kind of my process and the process that we follow to do this implementation of the Article 12 rather than the data confidentiality. We first define what are the desired uses, this purpose of the application. And this is non-trivial, and I have used the worst smart words, whatever thing, so that you remember the ugly thing on my slide. Because this is the very, very hard process, right? Every time in every project that we have, this takes us 2 to 6 months of work of actually embedding ourselves in the organization, talking with them, learning what they need, and know really what is this purpose, right? And distill it. And then even after we are doing the project, we meet with them very often to make sure that we never lose kind of the idea that they had. In the context is enough. The 2 to 6 months were done in a week because that's how planning audit work. But typically this is a very long process. And then we identify the minimal data we need for this purpose. And for this, we actually use a lot of our crypto knowledge to actually know, well, how much we could compress, or we think about, oh, what is the minimum thing that you need, and that's how the contact tracing apps came to be. If I need to make a notification, the information that I need, is to know, was I close to someone? I don't need to know where or whom or all of these things, right? And then you try to implement something that leads you there using normally a lot of privacy-enhancing technologies or advanced crypto, as we have seen now. And this is another kind of thing that is very important that I feel that both in the privacy community and the crypto community, sometimes we have forgotten that this privacy is not a goal. Again, it's not about data confidentiality, it's just the means to get to the goal, which is to protect the people. And if we just think that once the pen is there and our job is done, then we are making a disservice to many of these communities and probably to ourselves and our children. A nice thing about purpose validation is that once you have this purpose and you identify this minimal information, you have something that we have come to term the fundamental leakage of the system. If to learn, to do your purpose, you need a bit of information, like in the case of the contact tracing app, you need to know you were close to someone, that will leak. And whatever attack you can do with this will happen, because you cannot avoid it, right? We cannot have the system of Schrodinger that does something and does not do something at the same time. And that is kind of the inherent harm of the system. And that is something that we have to eat. There is nothing. And in the case of the contact tracing apps, we could reduce this a lot. Some systems have a bigger fundamental leakage, and there is some harm that actually comes with that, which means that you need to first identify those, and if those harms are not acceptable, then don't deploy the system, right? Acceptable and unacceptable means also your benefit or harms versus benefit, right? In the case of the humanitarian organizations, actually there's a bunch of times, because we have done this analysis for something they wanted, and we said, like, look guys, you need a lot of data to do this. So your fundamental harms are very big, linear harms. So don't spend a lot of money on actually making this privacy preserving. We could do this, like my students would love it, right? We would have 2 papers and S&P, they would have a lot of fun doing this thing, but actually it's not worth it. Like, you're not gaining anything because your inherent risk is already too big, but they should actually deploy it because that's how they save lives, right? So there, maybe this. In many other places, you know, maybe they are not, because maybe it's not about saving lives, but about making money, and then maybe it's not the best of game. The second very nice thing is that if you decide that you accept the harms, whether because the benefit is too big or because harms are not so complicated, then it means that your privacy preserving design is a bit more flexible, because you don't need to protect the fundamental leakage. So that gives you a little bit more of leeway on what you can do, and some of the proofs that otherwise would be impossible to make because we want to protect absolutely everything in the system, now become possible because we don't need to protect everything, we just need to protect whatever on top the fundamental leakage. So that allows us to actually do a bunch of stuff in these papers, right, that they have presented today and others, which were like, yeah, you know, we have this thing, but we accept it, and now we make sure that nothing else, right, this is the best system you could get. And if you don't accept it, then well, don't deploy it, but otherwise this is the best that you can do. A consequence, on the other hand, and this is one of the things that I find very, very hard to grapple with, and that doesn't let me sleep, is that, again, this narrow functionality is actually the thing that brings the power. And when I'm decided, and when I work with the Red Cross, and I actually say, well, we're going to do this particular thing, I'm actually decided what recipients of aid can have. And that's a lot of power. So this is, this is something that is unavoidable. Again, it's an inherent issue. Oh, I see. It's an inherent issue. And how we solve it is by maybe taking back the control of what we can do, and not letting the few making this decision for us, when maybe they don't have the same kind of global optimization functions that we have, because they are companies and they have always economical interests. And there is also the problem that sometimes the purpose cannot be predefined. And this is the problem of the digital identity of the EUBI, which is that we don't really have a purpose. Like, the purpose is showing attributes. So how do we do this? And can you guys that know a lot about this functionality, can we actually capture function tree in our security definitions, right? Can we still moving from data confidentiality to actually something that says, okay, the system is secure as long as it can only do this number of functions that we consider acceptable, and if it breaks down, then it is not. So that we can say which implementations of the system maybe are secure. Can we quantify how creepy can be one system? And there again, the UEDI is a very important case. Designated commitment in TLS is another thing where you have the seminal property, in which the idea is that we can use TLS connection to bootstrap some secrets to then prove more statements. And the idea is great because again, you can do like in the UEDI, bring some more trustworthiness to transactions. But if now you're proving attributes about what you are doing under TLS, at what point you actually kind of are breaking the TLS properties because we're proving too many things about what before was encapsulated in my TLS connection. And to finish today, I think that doing privacy engineering, I think in privacy engineering is all about data confidentiality. It's very problematic because it actually is the forsake all of our fundamental rights in the name of very nice cryptography, and pets should be used to do purpose limitation and as such help us limit the harm the digital systems will make. And that means that we need to actually talk more about this purpose, something that we don't do and something that many times actually in the crypto community we kind of take a step back because we're making Lego blocks and somebody will build the castle. But actually the castle matters. And what kind of castles you like to build matters. So it would be very nice if we can actually also embed those, kind of bring some of these definitions that typically now we leave to the application. I know that I'm kind of breaking all of the, like we spend, I don't know how many years going from waterfowl kind of design of systems to agile and as a service where we have blocks and then we build them, to say maybe if we want actually to have a protective world, a privacy preserving world, we need to go back a little bit more to this waterfall kind of thing where people need to think about the whole stack. And we also must acknowledge that there is this fundamental leakage of systems and discuss about it, because when we put it under the rug is when we actually have problems, because many systems that actually maybe should not be out there because they are privacy preserving, but actually what they leak is enough to do all the work. And a lot of this work has been worked by many people through the years. We had a seminar in Nashville this year. We'll talk a lot about privacy washing. Here is Seth and Michael, which are the people that actually brought me this topic. And I also want to mention my student Teresa and Christian and my postdoc Walter, now Professor at CISPA, because they did a lot of kind of forming all of this way of thinking about systems in a kind of a different way. And finally, if you like this thing, if you want to discuss more, let's talk about it today. Come and visit me in Bochum. Very happy to host people for as long as they want. I'm looking for crypto-Jedi posts. As I said, I'm not a cryptographer. I didn't want to try to post one, but I need a lot of crypto to do a lot of this work. So if you're interested in that, please talk to me. And MPI also has tenure-track positions. Postdoc is not what you want to do. If you want to become a professor, talk to me as well. We have very attractive positions, not that much teaching, very nice funding, and Bochum is much prettier than what people think. So with this, thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Do you have any recommendations for us as a community how we behave or respond or react to things where it's very clearly intentional? Like you mentioned, like the Google and Facebook examples, and they know what they're doing to an extent. They are advertising, they make their money off advertising, so this is kind of built in. So it's not like they don't know about the concepts of minimizing the data that you collect. They're very aware. So what do we do?
So I think that's a community and we do different things. One of them is maybe start to having more in our papers about what are the good uses or bad uses of this thing. And again, this fundamental leakage, right, of this fundamental. The other one is talk more about this power kind of thing and make it apparent, right, that when we discuss and when Google and Apple do this thing and they are all with the privacy and we're all very happy and some of us are very happy because they actually took over protocol and that gets you grants and that gets you a lot of well, I mean, it is also unavoidable sometimes that this happens, but we need to call this off, right? We need to participate more in the public debate on what does this mean, and sometimes actually say, well, privacy has an issue on the one side. And then I still think that there are a bunch of, as I say, kind of bringing some of this more into the theoretical realm of like being able to get those into definitions. I think that this will also be very helpful. And I'm thinking about myself when I go and I have to talk to policymakers, right? And some of these arguments, I have to make a fluffy argument. It would be so nice if I could say, well, here is the, like for other things, I can actually prove, right? And it's like, here's a paper that proves that this thing is wrong, that what this guy is claiming is wrong. Sometimes I don't. So I think that there is some more work to actually, maybe again, right, kind of bring some of these application problems to the layers below. Actually it would be very easy. And we do this for some of the stuff, like we have binding, right? We call this binding where we bind the cryptographic protocol to whatever the TE building on is doing. So maybe we can also bind some of the application. I don't know how to do it, right? You are the guys that do this thing. I'm here just making wishes. Hope this helped some way.
Thank you.
We have one question from online that is also a bit a question that I had. So how do you know or ensure that data cannot be used for anything beyond the intended use? And I'm actually curious if you have some processes to when you're trying to build this.
So there are, I mean, in some of them, like in the case of the contra cases, tracing apps is actually clear, right? Because what we build cannot do this thing unless you get outside of the threat model. But this is like in anything, right? Like if you do have extra information, maybe you can have, but then of course, then you don't have the database that we created. You have more another database that you created, and maybe that serves to you. In other things, we actually go and try to do the math, and that goes more on what we traditionally fall into the privacy kind of work of if I have now these attributes, what can I do with them? What can I infer with them? About I have a theory, no, I have a student trying to work on the beginning of a theory of actually how do we make this decision and can we build better tools to help people understand at what point the function creep has happened, right? At what point revealing one more attribute essentially gives you the same as the whole database. But I don't, like so far we do it very manually, and a lot of these things we also make it hand in hand with the stakeholders, like in the case of the Red Cross, and we decide these are the things that we're going to reveal, then we work with them on trying to understand what can be the implications of us revealing these things, and then in some of them we can try to push to have less, and some of them were like, well, it's the fundamental leakage again. I cannot do more magic than that.
Thank you for the answer. I think we're actually just in time for lunch, so we should close here and
Thank you.